Welcome everyone to The Howl. I'm Ryan Contreras Betz, and in this episode, I sat down with new Hersey Principal Dr. McFaul to discuss his upbringing, how that affected his decision to become an administrator, how he has enjoyed his first 2 weeks at Hersey, and his future goals as the new principal. Thanks for joining, and we hope you enjoy. Hello everybody, and welcome back to The Howl. My name is Ryan Contreras Betz, and we are very excited to have Dr. McFaul joining us as our guest today. Dr. McFaul, how are we doing this morning?
Doing great. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, so Dr. McFaul, I know I've had the opportunity to talk with you on numerous occasions now, and I'm really excited to get you out there in front of the rest of the Hersey audience. You know, some people might not have gotten to know you as much as I guess I have a little bit.
Sure.
So can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of growing up and like how you got into the administrative role?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, interestingly, I grew up in northern Wisconsin, small town called Superior, about 7 hours from here. And my original degree wasn't in education. I actually started out in healthcare administration and finance. Had a really nice corner office, and I wore a suit and tie every day. And it was choking the life out of me, you know, a little bit. I needed to move on, and I found that education was exactly where I needed to be. So I went back to St. Mary's University in Winona, Minnesota, got an education master's degree, and then started teaching in District 15. Actually, I was a fifth grade teacher in Palatine, and you know, enjoyed that experience immensely. But eventually started coaching high school sports. I was a lacrosse coach at Palatine High School for 12 years, and that experience kind of led me into administration. So while I was at Palatine, I became the dean of students, and then after that, it kind of morphed into assistant principal, and then about 8 years ago, I actually became the associate principal for student wellness and operations at Barrington High School, and then I've landed here now. And you know, I think I've always been interested in things that happen and work behind the scenes, and I felt like that's what administration was to some degree. The real work, the real action, the real valued activity happens with classroom teachers and in front of kids, and administrators help steer that a bit, and I was interested in how that worked, and I think that's kind of where my trajectory came from.
So like you started in healthcare, and then, I mean, obviously it's shocking to me just how that doesn't correlate usually.
Right. Yep.
You know, you said you grew up in a smaller town. Do you think that had anything to do with just wanting to get involved more?
I think probably my parents had the most influence. My dad was a school administrator for a technical college. He was actually the president of a technical college up in Wisconsin, and growing up, I probably always knew, honestly, that being a teacher and a coach would be a really awesome career choice. But I felt like I was too young to really already have that in my head, so I needed to try something different, and I did, and I kind of came back full circle. I think, you know, for me, it was a lot of soul searching. You know, while I was working in the healthcare field, I became a ski instructor, and during that time, I felt the joys and interests of helping someone else figure something out. And I was talking to my dad about how much I enjoyed being a ski instructor after my quote-unquote regular job. And he said, yeah, that's really neat. You know, those are called teachers in the real world. I was like, oh, yeah. And so it kind of went from there. I've always enjoyed helping people. And, you know, ski instructor was kind of like that first natural step into teaching.
Well, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, ski instructor, because I've never been skiing. I know I grew up in Fox River Grove for a little bit. Do you know they've got the massive
big,
ski
awesome
jump?
Ski jump, yeah.
Have you ever been down it?
Never been down it. I've watched them go down it, and I thought, those guys are crazy.
Yeah, I know. So that's my only foray into skiing. So ski instructor laid the foundations to become a teacher, head into the education field. Yeah. And obviously parental support. You said it was your dad who?
Yeah, my dad, I mean, both my parents were amazingly supportive, but my dad was in the educational field. So I was always around schooling. I was always around education. I saw how it made a difference in people's lives post high school.
Yeah, definitely. And so you said you came from northern Wisconsin. How did you end up in Illinois in the suburbs of Chicago?
Yeah, right. So in 1999, 2000, I think it might have been, I was at a job fair in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and District 15 Palatine just happened to be there. And, you know, the elementary school district that I was with interviewed me and offered me a job on the spot. And I thought, wow, you know, I have some college loans right now. I've just got offered a job. I've never lived in, you know, the big city before, and I told my parents, I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to give it a shot, and I'll be here for a year or two, and then I'm going to come back to northern Wisconsin where my roots are, and take it from there. And then you meet a girl, and the rest is history, right? 3 kids later and a wonderful family. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, I could just imagine going up to my parents and saying, let's say I was from up north. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go to the big, apologies, the big town of Palatine.
Yep.
I know, because I have friends that actually live in Palatine, go to the high school. And it used to not always be the bigger town that it is now. It used to be a country field.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of the funny correlation there.
Yeah, for me, there is just one stretch between, here, Palatine, basically in downtown Chicago. So I just told everybody I was in Chicago, even though I was in Palatine.
I'm sure you spent plenty of time in the city when you first came.
When
right?
I first came, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anybody in this entire area. So I moved into a house or a room that I rented, and after school, I would drive to the train station and take the train downtown and just meander around. I didn't know anybody here. So yeah, that's really what it was about.
So it was almost like your own high school experience meandering around the city.
Just an adventure.
Yeah, that's really cool. Trying to think, how exactly did Palatine, like at the high school when you moved there, because how long were you in the elementary role?
Just 3 years. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So that was a quick turnaround from going with little 5th graders
Yeah,
all the way up to high school.
high school. Yep.
How did Palatine really shape the way you viewed high schoolers?
Well, that's a good question. To some degree, high schoolers were 5th graders in just bigger bodies. They were learners. They had problems. They had excitements, just like younger kids did. So really, that transition wasn't difficult. But what it did do is the excitement that I felt in a high school was far different than an elementary school. At an elementary school, school was over at 3:30, and the building was basically shut down at that point, except for maybe a Boy Scouts meeting or Girl Scouts or something like that. But the high school was like a living, breathing machine, 7 days a week, 15 hours a day, it seemed like. And so for me, that was the excitement that kind of got me charged up to remain in education and to remain in high school education, just because there's so much energy that runs through a high school setting. And Palatine's an excellent high school. I got to know so many caring and dedicated teachers. Obviously, I was a coach there. And just the relationships that were built. That was kind of like my first real family, outside of my own family, of course.
Yeah, and Palatine's huge. I've been inside of that. I don't know where to go whenever I'm over at that school. And then Barrington, how was that transition from Palatine? I know Barrington's big too, but it's its own world. I mean, the gaps between every high school is different because you have different kids, obviously.
Sure.
Different coworkers for you.
Sure.
How was that transition at that point?
The hardest part, honestly, was the relationships. Like I said, I kind of grew up, if you will, while I was at Palatine. The people that were at Palatine High School were at my wedding, around for the birth of my children. So those were the guys, if you will, that I grew up around, that kind of I developed around. And leaving those relationships was probably the hardest part for me going to Barrington. The role I was prepared for, and I was excited for at Barrington. So that's really what made the move happen for me. I think if it was a lateral change, I wouldn't have even explored that. But it was a move up. I was going to be working a little bit more closely with student wellness and operations, which I think became a natural desire for me, and a connection. So the job itself was exciting for me, but leaving the relationships was the hardest part of the transition, as it was going from Barrington to Hersey. It's the relationships that I built over time that I miss. But of course, I've landed on an amazing job here. So yeah, it's the relationship pieces, and that's kind of what I'm all about.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely relate to that because, I've moved around so much. I know I briefly mentioned growing up in Fox River Grove. I grew up in Schaumburg, Lake Zurich. I've moved back and forth between Lake Zurich and here plenty of times. So I know the relationships are definitely something strange. And definitely I've noticed in high school you build different relationships. Obviously, it's different for a student.
Sure.
But even building it with some teachers, like teachers that I know have retired, building certain relationships. I know if anyone's listening, if you remember Mr. Borgoff last year, our U.S. history teacher, one of the nicest human beings I've ever met and a great teacher that helped. And so the relationships always are going to play a factor. And at least the good thing is it wasn't too much of a geographical change. I know Palatine and Barrington are closer than Arlington Heights and Barrington.
Sure.
So at least you were able to keep in contact with a bunch of friends, I'm assuming?
Yeah, absolutely. And even the Palatine people that I left behind, my closest friends are actually my Palatine friends, if you will. Because again, like I said, that was the formation of those relationships. And so those are the closest guys that I have. Made great friends while I was at Barrington, and I hang out with them, go golfing and do things like that. Actually, just last week, I saw that our golf team, so Hersey, where I'm at now, was in a golf match against Palatine and Barrington. So those are the three schools that were on the golf course. So I went over to Rob Roy Golf Course and saw three very close friends between those schools. And, I said, hey, maybe we should rename this tournament next year, like the McFaul trifecta, and have those three schools together. I don't think that's going to play out, but it was really nice to see people. And that's the great part of still being connected to the schools that I was at. First of all, they are close together. We're in the MSL together. This weekend, on Friday night, we're at Fremd.
Yep.
And a very close friend of mine is Mark Langer. Mark Langer was a teacher at Palatine High School. He became an assistant principal with me at Palatine High School, and he is now the principal at Fremd. And so it seems like no matter where you go, the world is a little bit smaller when you're in administration. And yeah, it's great to be connected and still part of the MSL family, if you will. And I know a lot of people who have spread their wings around the area that I'm still connected to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know I've talked with you about this before, but obviously Hersey baseball beat Barrington in the MSL championship.
I love it.
So I know that's one that I'm going to have conversations with
step,
you plenty
right?
of times.
Yeah. I was just on my way here in the hallway. I met someone, the girls last night for the first time in X amount of years. The freshman tennis team beat Barrington's freshman tennis team. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really is fun how interconnected high school athletics, high school, just anything is. I know you were saying earlier about the difference between elementary school, like grade school and high school is such a living and breathing atmosphere. And there's always something going on. I mean, even me talking about earlier, I know people at Palatine. I never thought I'd know anybody that lived on the other side of Rand Road,
right,
for crying out loud. And now here I am. Oh, yeah, I know so-and-so over there. I know so-and-so over here.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a fun
Yeah, those are great
transition.
connections to make. Yeah.
Yeah. So now you're 2 weeks in at Hersey. Obviously, you've had time to settle in, get your feet wet. I mean, sit down here on the podcast. What has been the biggest success that you've seen?
Well, I shared this story earlier at our assembly and even with our Orange Crush. And the biggest success is really just being part of the success. Like I've said to a couple of groups before, I've always been around conferences where I hear about Hersey's Orange Crush. I've been around different meetings where someone will show a video of what they're doing with the SOS program at Hersey and the volunteer programs at Hersey and Hersey this, Hersey this, Hersey this, Hersey this. And I got to a point where I was like, okay, I get it. Hersey's amazing, great, cool, wow. And I tried to emulate the things I was hearing at the schools I was at, and it never really seemed to have the same panache, I guess, as when I would see it happening at Hersey because it's natural here. And so I guess for me, if you want to talk about the greatest success, it's being part of what is already a history of such great success. And so now I'm in the Orange Crush. I'm seeing those things develop and evolve, and I'm like, wow, this is real. And it wasn't just a cool video that was created. There's teachers, administrators, students, parents supporting all of these efforts. And I'm sure as it develops, I'll find more and more answers to that question. But right now, I'm just sinking my teeth into what already is just a well-established and well-developed school atmosphere, and I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I know from experience being here 3 years now, it's crazy. Things that I'm just getting involved in now that have been just so well-oiled, just continuing to grow. And I'm assuming that's kind of a big goal for you, is to continue to grow what's already established.
Yeah, it's, you respect tradition. You respect tradition. And then at the same time, I also want to try to find maybe the new or next tradition. I don't really know what that is right now. I've talked to a few people about like what it takes to have the heart of a Husky. So that might be something I'm going to start to develop a little bit further with some think tank groups of students and administrators and teachers. But, right now I'm still kind of learning the culture, what the things are that we already do so well, and maybe what some of the gaps are and unique opportunities that we could recreate or create for the first time.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. We're going to kind of wrap up with a couple of rapid fire, little more informal questions
Go for
now.
it. Can't wait.
So what are your favorite sports teams? I know Northern
come
Wisconsin.
Come on.
I'm already ready for
That's
this.
low-hanging fruit. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Milwaukee Bucks, you name it. Wisconsin, all the way.
I was worried for a second when I heard that answer.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Brewers beat the Cubs, or the Cubs beat the Brewers last night. Brewers won 2 nights ago.
So was it 4 back maybe? Cubs are 4 back?
Cubs are 4 back now. I think they're a game and a half up in the wild card.
Okay.
So that'll be a tight division race
It'll
down
be
the
a tight
line.
division. It always usually is.
Yeah. I'm not skipping school to go to the game today as much as I'd love to.
If you get tickets, let me know.
Hey, maybe we can have a Hersey
I know a guy who
dispatch.
can call you out.
I do know one guy, I guess. Do you have any favorite local food destinations in the suburbs area?
I live in Cary. There's a restaurant right on the railroad tracks called The Tracks.
I've been there many times because I grew up in Fox. Oh, it's so good.
Fantastic.
I was
Great burgers. It's a great spot to be. So that's probably my favorite.
Yeah, Tracks is good. I know not everyone's from the Cary area. It's a little farther out there. But
Take the train. It's right on the train line.
It really is. I mean, that's why it's called Tracks.
Yep.
It's so cool. I was actually there. We were speaking of the Cubs earlier. I was there during the 2015 NLDS when Schwarber hit that home run onto the scoreboard.
Onto the scoreboard,
We
yeah.
were eating outside at Tracks. And
Yeah. I
that's
bet
kind
you
of-
it just erupted in there, huh?
It was so loud.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been to like restaurants like during big events like Hawks Cup parades and all that, and it was nothing like I've ever seen just with the Cubs.
Yeah, it's
history
a great
there.
atmosphere. Yeah.
Have you found any local like in Arlington Heights yet?
Well, I've had some delicious pizza from Jet's Pizza. Got delivered to a meeting, so I would say that that's probably my top-notch destination right now. My wife actually went to a Jet's Pizza in North Carolina and said, I had never heard of it. And she said, you got to try Jet's Pizza. And then all of a sudden, there's a Jet's Pizza that moved into town, and I just had it. It's the real deal.
Definitely is the real deal. I have kind of a general idea in what I think you're going to answer. Are you a morning or a night owl?
I'm a morning guy.
Morning person.
I always feel bad because sometimes people will text me, friends will text me at like 9:45. I don't see it until 4:45 or 5:15 when I get up. But then I usually text them back, and they don't get it until they're up. So, yeah, I'm a morning person.
What do you have to say to any of the students that might disagree that morning is better?
Early bird catches the worm. You get more things done in the morning, I feel like.
Definitely. Do you have any final words you just like to give to the Hersey student population as a whole?
I mean, come and get to know me. That's probably the hardest part for me right now is with seniors, I have, 169 days left before you guys are walking across the stage at graduation. And, that'll be a special moment for me as my first ever graduation as a principal, but I will not have built years and years and years of relationships with the students who are walking across that stage. So for me, that's an important piece, is getting to know the students as well as I can, and then before graduation. And I have time with the juniors and the sophomores and the freshmen. But it's that senior class. It's my first class, and it's your graduation year. I'd like to get to know as many seniors as I can. So if I can find ways to do that, I'm all in.
Yeah, definitely. Just speaking to the students, come get to know Dr. McFaul. He's awesome. I mean, I've now sat down with him, I think, 3 separate occasions to do some sort of conversation and work with. He's awesome, and he's funny, too. I know you've seen me laughing a few times here. He's got some good ones. Well, that's going to be it for today's show. Thank you so much to Dr. McFaul for joining us this morning, and thank you to our viewers for listening in. Be sure to tune in next time, and thanks again for joining us.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.